At 4:17 on the morning of April 16, 1945, Feldwebel Ernst Barkmann climbed into his tank in the ruins of Seelow Heights, 50 kilometers east of Berlin. He was 24 years old, a veteran of 3 years on the Eastern Front. He had survived Kursk, survived the retreat across Ukraine, survived the meat grinder of Poland. He was about to face the largest artillery barrage in human history. 2.5 million Soviet soldiers supported by 6,200 tanks were coming. Barkmann's tank was not a Tiger, not a Panther, not one of Germany's celebrated wonder weapons that filled the propaganda newsreels. It was a Panzer IV OSFH, the tank his commanders called obsolete in 1941, the design they planned to replace with something better, the workhorse that nobody wanted to talk about because it lacked the glamour of the Cats, the Tigers and Panthers that dominated the headlines. But Barkmann and every veteran Panzer crew on that frozen morning knew something the propaganda ministry would never admit. When you needed a tank that would start, that would fight, that would bring you home, you didn't want a Tiger, you wanted a Panzer IV. This is the story of the tank Germany tried to retire before the war even started. The design that was supposed to be temporary, the platform that outlasted every German wonder weapon, the simple machine that kept fighting when everything advanced, everything modern, everything technically superior broke down and died. The Panzer IV was never supposed to be Germany's main battle tank. When development began in 1936, German armor doctrine was clear. Tanks had two distinct roles. Light and medium panzers armed with machine guns and small cannons would handle reconnaissance and infantry support. These were the Panzer I, II, and III. Heavy tanks armed with large caliber guns would destroy enemy fortifications and provide long-range fire support. This was the Panzer IV. The original specification called for a support weapon. It needed a turret large enough to mount a short-barreled 75mm gun. It needed armor thick enough to protect the crew from small arms fire and shell fragments. It needed mechanical simplicity for easy maintenance in the field. It was a mobile artillery piece, not a tank killer. Krupp won the development contract. Their engineers created a straightforward design, a simple hull, a spacious turret, a reliable Maybach HL108 engine producing 300 horsepower. The suspension used leaf springs, the same basic system found on trucks. Not sophisticated, but proven and easy to repair. The first Panzer IV OSFA-AF rolled off the production line in October 1937. It weighed 20 tons. Its short 75mm Keddo AK-37 gun fired high-explosive shells designed to demolish bunkers and infantry positions. Maximum effective range against armored targets was maybe 300 meters. Nobody cared. The Panzer IV wasn't meant to fight other tanks. Production began slowly. 35 OSFI models, 42 OSFB, 134 OSFC. Germany was building an army from scratch. The Panzer IV was expensive at 103,000 Reichsmarks per unit, about twice the cost of a Panzer III. The Wehrmacht ordered them in modest numbers. They were insurance, the heavy support element backing up the real stars, the faster, more numerous Panzer IIIs. Then came Poland in September 1939. The Blitzkrieg, Lightning War. German armor smashed through Polish defenses in weeks. The Panzer IV performed its support role adequately. Crews were satisfied, commanders were satisfied. The design seemed proven. France in May 1940 validated the concept. Or so it appeared. German panzers swept through the Ardennes, bypassed the Maginot Line, encircled Allied armies. 6 weeks later, France surrendered. The Panzer IV had supported the advance. It had demolished fortifications. It had suppressed infantry. It had done exactly what it was designed to do. But German intelligence officers reading captured French and British after-action reports noticed something disturbing. Enemy tankers weren't afraid of the Panzer IV's short gun. They described it as ineffective against armored targets. British Matilda II heavy infantry tanks had shrugged off direct hits. French Char B1 heavy tanks had absorbed shells without penetrating damage. The Panzer IV's high-explosive rounds were excellent against soft targets, but harmless against modern armor plate. This was by design. The Panzer III with its 50mm gun was supposed to kill enemy tanks. But the Panzer III was struggling. Allied tanks often had better armor. The 50mm gun lacked penetrating power. German tankers were discovering that their tank-killing platform couldn't reliably kill tanks. The obvious solution was to upgrade the Panzer III with a more powerful gun. Engineers tried. They designed a long-barreled 75mm gun for the Panzer III chassis. The gun was too large. The turret ring, the circular opening where the turret mounts to the hull, was too small. It couldn't accommodate the recoil forces. The Panzer III had reached the end of its development potential. This created an unexpected problem. Germany needed a tank killer immediately. Designing a completely new platform would take years. Years Germany didn't have. The invasion of the Soviet Union was being planned for summer 1941. German armor needed more firepower before then. Someone, and history doesn't record exactly who, looked at the Panzer IV and had a simple thought: that turret is big. Much bigger than necessary for the short support gun. What if we put the long 75mm gun in there? The engineering team ran the numbers. The Panzer IV's turret ring was 66 centimeters in diameter. The Panzer III's was just 60 centimeters. That extra 6 centimeters was enough. The long gun would fit. The turret could handle the recoil forces. Weight distribution would be acceptable. The hull could be reinforced. The suspension could be upgraded. In March 1942, the Panzer IV OSF F2 entered production. The short 75mm KWK-37 support gun was gone. In its place sat the long 75mm KWK-40L43. The barrel protruded nearly 2 meters beyond the hull front. It looked ungainly, almost comical. The gun appeared too large for the platform, but the performance was revolutionary. The new gun could penetrate 92mm of armor at 500 meters. It could kill any Allied tank in service. The Soviet T-34, the tank that had shocked German forces in 1941 with its sloped armor and powerful gun, was now vulnerable at combat ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. The temporary support tank had become Germany's primary tank killer. And unlike the temperamental Tigers and Panthers that would follow, it worked. It worked in the frozen mud of the Eastern Front. It worked in the baking deserts of North Africa. It worked in the mountains of Italy. It worked because its design philosophy was fundamentally different from the wonder weapons that captured headlines. The Tiger Wine entered service in late 1942. It was magnificent. 88mm gun, armor up to 100mm thick. Psychological impact that terrified Allied tank crews. It was also a maintenance nightmare. The overlapping road wheel design, intended to distribute the 54-ton weight, trapped mud that froze overnight. Crews spent hours each morning chipping ice from the suspension before the tank could move. The Maybach HL-230 engine produced 700 horsepower, but consumed fuel at catastrophic rates. Range was perhaps 120 kilometers before refueling. The complex transmission broke down constantly. A Tiger battalion of 45 tanks typically had perhaps 15 operational at any given time. The rest were undergoing repairs, broken transmissions, thrown tracks, engine problems. The Tiger was a brilliant weapon when it worked. It spent most of its time not working. The Panther entered service in summer 1943. It was supposed to be the perfect medium tank, sloped armor inspired by the T-34. A powerful 75mm L-70 gun that could penetrate 138mm of armor at 1,000 meters. Speed and firepower combined. It was rushed into production. The first Panthers deployed to Kursk caught fire. The engines overheated. The transmissions failed. Early models averaged 150 kilometers between breakdowns. Crews called it a death trap. Later Panthers improved. The bugs were worked out. By 1944, it was an excellent tank when properly maintained. But proper maintenance required time, parts, and trained mechanics. Germany was losing the war. Time was short. Parts were scarce. Trained mechanics were dead. The Panzer IV just kept running. Its Maybach HL-120 engine was simple. 300 horsepower, adequate for the 25-ton weight. Nothing fancy, nothing to break. The leaf spring suspension was crude but nearly indestructible. A broken leaf spring could be replaced in 30 minutes with basic tools. The transmission was commercial grade, the same type used in trucks. Parts were everywhere. Crews trusted it. Feldwebel Ernst Barkmann's account is typical. He described requesting a Panzer IV when offered a Panther. His reasoning was practical. The Panther might be a better tank when everything worked, but the Panther was always broken. The Panzer IV started every morning. It drove where you pointed it. It fired when you pulled the trigger. It brought you home. This reliability created a strange situation. By 1944, the Panzer IV was technically obsolete. Its armor was too thin, 70 mm at maximum on the turret front, 80 mm on the hull front. Allied tanks could penetrate that at reasonable combat ranges. Its gun, while effective, was inferior to the Panthers' long 75 mm and the Tiger's 88 mm. Its speed was modest, 40 km per hour maximum on roads, but it was available. Production never stopped. Even as Germany's industrial base collapsed under Allied bombing, Panzer IV production continued. 8,564 were built, more than all Tigers and Panthers combined. When a Panzer IV was destroyed, another arrived from the factory. When a Tiger was destroyed, it stayed destroyed. The economics were brutal. A Tiger I cost 300,000 Reichsmarks. A Panther cost 117,000. A Panzer IV cost 103,000. You could build 3 Panzer IVs for the price of 1 Tiger, and those 3 Panzer IVs would all be running while the Tiger sat broken. This became Germany's unspoken armor doctrine in the final 2 years. The wonder weapons got the headlines. The propaganda newsreels showed Tigers and Panthers crushing Soviet tanks, but the fighting was done by Panzer IVs. They formed the backbone of panzer divisions. They fought the delaying actions. They covered retreats. They held positions when everything else had broken down. At Seelow Heights on April 16, 1945, when 2.5 million Soviet soldiers attacked, the defenders had perhaps 100 operational tanks. Most were Panzer IVs. The Tigers were gone. The Panthers were abandoned for lack of fuel. But the Panzer IVs were there. They fought. Barkmann's crew destroyed 11 Soviet tanks before withdrawing. The tank kept running. The final Panzer IV rolled off the assembly line in March 1945. Production ended only because the factories were captured or destroyed. If Germany had lasted another month, more would have been built. After the war, the design kept serving. Syria operated Panzer IVs until 1967. Spain built licensed copies until 1954. The platform outlived the Reich by decades. The lesson is clear. In war, simple beats sophisticated, reliable beats powerful, available beats perfect. The Panzer IV was never the best German tank. It was just the one that never stopped working. And that made it the most important tank Germany ever built. If you found this engineering story compelling, hit that like button. This is what we do. Deep dives into the technical truths that shaped history. Subscribe for more. Tell us where you're watching from. Thank you for being here.